there have been some truly historic instances of major deception in F1. Today, we're looking at the most bizarre and insane ways drivers have cheated to win in F1. It's unbelievable how far teams will go in order to win. Numbers 1 and 6 blew our minds. Number 1, Michael Schumacher's deliberate crashes. Michael Schumacher, who won 7 world championships and 91 races in his illustrious career, is without a doubt one of the greatest F1 drivers of all time, wasn't afraid to skirt the rules, employing an unusual strategy on the track to gain an advantage at critical times. The collision between Schumacher and Damon Hill in Adelaide in 1994 was arguably the most ambiguous of the 3 high-profile moves. Schumacher took the lead right away, with Hill close behind. Until lap 36, the order between the two remained unchanged. Hill was closing in on Schumacher when he went off the track at the East Terrace corner, hitting a wall with his right side wheels, potentially damaging his suspension. Schumacher cut Hill off at the next corner as he dived down the inside, and the two collided, sending Schumacher partially airborne and into the wall. Hill received a broken wishbone from Schumacher's contact, and despite technical director Patrick Head's best effort to bend it back into shape, the title had slipped away from the Williams driver. Schumacher tried a similar move on Jacques Villeneuve 3 years later, as the two approached Jerez dry sack corner. Villeneuve moved down the inside of the Ferrari driver, who turned his wheel and collided with the Williams side pod. Schumacher then drifted into the gravel and became stuck, while Villeneuve had to nurse the car home in points to claim the championship. The Canadian dutifully did so, and an investigation would later lead to Schumacher's disqualification from the season. Nevertheless, Schumacher was up to his old tricks 9 years later in his battle for the 2006 title with Fernando Alonso at the Monaco Grand Prix. To keep Alonso off the front row, Schumacher set a pole time and then parked at the Rakasi corner, effectively ending Alonso's hot lap. Schumacher claimed he had simply locked up, but the FIA suspected it was a deliberate strategy to secure pole at a circuit that was notoriously difficult to overtake on, and he was demoted to the back of the grid. Number 2, Lewis Hamilton's Spygate scandal. Only 2 years after the massive Spygate scandal of 2007, McLaren was involved in another sleazy affair, and Lewis Hamilton didn't make a good impression either. At the 2009 Australian Grand Prix, Jarno Trulli came off the track behind the safety car as Hamilton pulled past the Toyota driver. Because McLaren wasn't sure if this was legal, Hamilton was told over the radio to let Trulli reclaim his position. Initially, the race management was unaware of anything. It was assumed that Trulli had illegally reclaimed the position, and the Italian was disqualified from the rankings. It was later revealed, however, that Hamilton lied to the stewards at his team's request that he had not voluntarily allowed Trulli to pass. After the dizziness was exposed, however, Hamilton would be disqualified, while Trulli would have his position on the podium reinstated. The scandal made headlines in Malaysia 1 race later. Hamilton was accused of lying in the Melbourne affair, prompting a witch hunt. Nevertheless, a scapegoat was needed, and Dave Ryan was chosen by McLaren. The sporting director was fired, despite the fact that the order likely came from the team management. Number 3, the infamous Crashgate debacle. Following Spygate, F1 played host to the Crashgate controversy the following season in 2008. The Renault team had begun to enjoy improved performance throughout the season, buoyed by the return of Fernando Alonso, and appeared to be in good shape heading into Singapore. However, just as Alonso was about to challenge for pole, his car developed a fuel leak in Q2, leaving him stranded on the track and unable to set a time. As a result, he would start the race in 15th. On lap 12, Alonso was the first driver who came into the pits. He switched his super soft tyres for the soft compound tyres and rejoined at the back of the field. But teammate Nelson Piquet Jr. crashed into the wall at turn 17, bringing out the safety car. With the pit lane now closed, Alonso was able to shuffle up in the pack and after pit stops and penalties for the drivers ahead, the Spanish driver sat in the lead and would eventually claim victory, which he attributed to the fortuitous timing of the safety car. But what nobody knew at the time is that everything had been meticulously planned. After being dropped by the team midway through 2009, Piquet went to the FIA with his testimony that Flavio Briatore and Pat Simmons asked him to crash, bring out the safety car and give Alonso the opportunity to win. Alonso, on the other hand, was not suspected of involvement in the crash. Briatore and Simmons left Red Bull in 2009 after it became clear that Piquet's allegations were true. Simmons admitted in his involvement in the scheme and was sentenced to a 5-year ban, while Briatore was banned from ever working for another F1 team ever again. ING, the team's title sponsor, also pulled out. Though his sentence was later overturned, Briatore has never returned to the sport in an official capacity. Number 4, Harry Schell and his corner-cutting antics. Alright, let's rewind the tape and go all the way back to the early days of Formula 1. During the 1950s, Harry Schell was a bit part player on the F1 grid, but after joining the Works BRM team in 1958, the American driver had his best season in the championship, proving a consistent point scorer at the team. After scoring 5 points for the team in 1959, Schell switched to a Cooper T51 for the final race of the year at Sebring, his home event. And in the absence of nearly as much media attention or cameras as in modern F1, Schell's impressive time to secure third place on the grid, a 3-minute 5.2 lap, nudged Ferrari's Tony Brooks off the front row at the end of the session for an all-Cooper front row. Ferrari was furious after being knocked off the front row, and after Schell's deception was revealed after the race, they were even more so. You see, Schell found a shortcut during his qualifying run, cut out the entire back straight and slowly made his way back into the circuit, presumably to avoid suspicion. Despite slowing down and waiting for a traffic break to rejoin, Schell was able to save a few seconds. On the 6th lap of the race, Schell suffered a clutch failure, so karma equalised things there. In any case, it rendered today's track limit complaints insignificant in comparison. Number 5, Felipe Massa's team orders. During his time as Felipe Massa's race engineer at Ferrari, Tom Schmedley's radio calls to the Brazilian were somewhat famous, but his veiled instruction to let Alonso through at the 2010 German Grand Prix became one of the most infamous radio messages in F1 history. Since Ferrari ordered Rubens Barrichello to slow down at the 2002 Austrian Grand Prix to allow Schumacher to pass, the FIA had to put a stop to team orders, fearing that such actions would bring F1 into disrepute. As a result, teams were forced to conceal them with cryptic messages, which were usually disguised as phrases that could be used in a car setting, such as Red Bull's infamous Multi-21. However, when Schmedley asked Massa to give up the Hockenheim seat to Alonso in 2010, the can of worms was reopened. Ferrari was fined $100,000 for violating sports regulations, and the team was probably lucky not to have their championship hopes jeopardised. The FIA concluded after the season that the ban on overt team orders was ineffective and reversed the decision in 2011. Number 6, Martin Brundle running underweight. Tyrrell was a force to be reckoned with in the early 1970s, but as F1 budgets skyrocketed, the British team struggled to compete. Tyrrell chose to stick with the cheaper, naturally aspirated Cosworth DFY V8 power units as turbo engines became more common in the sport. The turbo units could churn out 1000 bhp in qualifying trim, which meant that Tyrrell was barely on the same playing field as the rest of its main rivals, let alone competing with them. But the Ockham-based team didn't give up and attempted to balance the scales with a dash of ingenuity, if you can call it that. Tyrrell's number 12 car was designed to run underweight, but after FISA closed the loophole that allowed cars to top up with water after the race, the team was forced to bring its car up to weight during the race. Midway through the race, teams were also unable to fuel their cars, but they could top off their water tanks. Tyrrell used their final pit stops to fill car with a mixture of water and lead shot, giving them plenty of time to race with an underweight car. Teams reported that a lot of lead shot was frequently spilled in the Tyrrell pit box, and the team was eventually caught loading the cars with extra weight. But that's not all. The team also laced the water with a variety of aromatics, which they used to spray into the engine's inlets to boost power. Tyrrell's full 1984 results were expunged, and the team was disqualified from the entire season because the team was thought to have taken on extra fuel during pit stops in addition to running underweight. Martin Brundle and Stefan Beloff were also barred from competing in the year's final 3 races. Number 7. Spygate. You could probably write a great Hollywood blockbuster inspired by the Spygate scandal that rocked Formula 1 in 2007. Ferrari suspended chief mechanic Nigel Stepney as a result of irregularities discovered at the Ferrari factory, according to head of communications Luca Colgiani. Ferrari then filed a lawsuit against a McLaren employee, later revealed to be chief designer Mike Coughlan. It was later revealed that Stepney had given Coughlan a wealth of Ferrari documentation estimated to be nearly 800 pages of secrets, which Coughlan had given to his wife to take to a walking Photoshop company. The whistleblowing photocopier set the chain of events in motion, and while McLaren's investigation found that no Ferrari documents had been passed to any other members of the team or incorporated into the cars, the FIA also did its due diligence. The FIA determined that McLaren had possession of the documents, but agreed that there was no evidence that Ferrari's design secrets were incorporated into the car's design. However, due to the new evidence coming into picture later, McLaren would be disqualified from the Constructors' Championship and fined a whopping $100 million. Although the drivers were free to compete for the championship, the battle between Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton eventually helped Kimi Räikkönen swoop in and take the 2007 title. What are your thoughts on the cheating scandals? Are there any else you'd like to see us investigate further? If you'd like learning about cheating drivers, then you're going to want to watch the video on your screen as well.